When he had done, there was silence in the shadows of the hall, for they were all enchanted by the story. After a while, Arete began to speak. "What do you think of him now, gentlemen?" she said. "Isn't he a fine figure of a man, and clever enough for anything? Now he is my guest, but you all have your share of the honor, so don't be in a hurry to let him go, and don't stint your gifts which he needs so much. You have plenty of good things in store, thanks be to heaven." Echenos followed up and said, "My friends, what our wise queen says is not far from the mark, just what we might expect. You should do as she bids you. But here is Alcinios, and all that we say or do depends on him." Alcinios answered at once, "Well, this shall certainly be done, if I am still alive and king over the seafaring Phaeacians. But let our guest make up his mind to stay at least over tomorrow, however anxious he might be to get home, and that will give me time to bring all our gifts together. To give him a safe journey is the concern of the whole nation, but mine most especially, since mine is the chief power in the land." Odysseus answered readily, "Most illustrious prince, if you should bid me to stay here for a 12-month, while you are making full preparations for the voyage and heaping your bounty upon me, that is just what I should choose. The fuller my hands, the better welcome I should find when I came home. They would all think the more of me and love me better when they saw me in Ithaca safe and sound." To this Alcinios replied, "My dear Odysseus, to see you is quite enough to show that you are no cheat or impostor like so many others. There is a rich crop of such men flourishing on the fat soil of this world who dress up fabulous tales about what no eye could ever see. But there is the spirit of honest truth about your story, as well as the artist's finish, and you have told it like a poet who understands his craft. What a sad story of your own travels in the whole Argive nation. But now be so kind as to tell us something more. Did you see any of your noble comrades who were at Ilion with you and there met their fate? There's any amount of this long night before us. It is not time for bed yet. Please go on with your tale of marvels. I could listen till daylight shall appear, if you would have the patience to finish your touching story under this roof." Odysseus was ready to play up to him and answered, "Most illustrious prince, there is a time for long stories and there is a time for sleep. But if you wish to hear, I would not grudge you a story even more touching, the misfortunes of those who perished afterwards, when they had come safe out of the perils of the battlefield and returned home only to fall by the treachery of a woman." "Very well, then. As soon as dread Persephone had dispersed the ghost of the woman, the ghost of Agamemnon, Atreides, came near full of sorrow. There was a crowd of others round him, those who died with him in the house of Aegisthus. The king knew me as soon as he had drunk the red blood. He cried aloud and wept, stretching out his hands toward me and trying to reach me, but there was no strength or power left in him, such as there used to be in that body so full of life. I shed tears of pity myself when I saw him, and spoke plainly as I called him by name. 'My lord Atreides, Agamemnon, king of men, what fate of dolorous death brought you low? Did Poseidon raise a terrible tempest and drown you in the sea? Or did the hand on an enemy strike you down on dry land in some foray or cattle raid, or fighting for conquest and captives?' He answered, 'Prince Laertiades, Odysseus, ever ready, Poseidon did not drown me in the sea, no enemy struck me down on dry land, but Aegisthus plotted my death with my accursed wife, invited me to his house, set me down to a banquet, butchered me as if I were an ox at the manger. That was how I died, and a shameful death it was. My friends were falling all around me, like a lot of tusker pigs that a rich man slaughters for a wedding or a banquet or a buddy meal. You have seen men fall in battle often enough, killed man to man or in the thick melee, but you never saw a sight so pitiable as that, as we lay about the wine bowl, and the tables were piled with meats, and the floor running with blood. Most frightful of all was the shriek of Cassandra, and she a king's daughter. I heard it when the traitress Clytemnestra killed her over my body. I tried to lift my hands, but dropped them again on the ground as I lay dying with a sword through my body. The bitch turned her back. She would not take the trouble to draw down my eyelids or to close my mouth in death. True it is, there is nothing so cruel and shameless as a woman. That woman proved it to be true when she plotted that shameful deed and murdered her lawful husband. Ah me, I did think to find welcome with my children and household when I came back to my home, but she had set her mind upon outrageous wickedness. She had brought shame on herself and all women forever, even if one of them is honest. I cried out, "Mercy upon us! Indeed, there is no doubt that Zeus, all-seeing, has been the deadly foe of the house of Atreus from the beginning, and he has always used the schemes of women. For Helen's sake, how many of us fell, and for you, Clytemnestra was laying her plot while you were far away." He answered, "Then take warning now yourself, and never be too kind, even to your wife. Never tell her all you have in your mind. You may tell something, but keep something to yourself. However, you will not be murdered by your wife, Odysseus. She is full of intelligence, and her heart is sound, your prudent and modest Penelope. Ah, she was a young bride when we left her and went to the war. There was a baby boy at her breast, and I suppose by this time he counts himself a man. Happy boy. His father will see him when he comes, sure enough, and he will give his father a kiss as a good boy should. But my wife would not even let me delight my eyes with the sight of my son. She killed the father first. But there is something I very much want to know. Have you heard anything about my son being alive somewhere in Orchomeneos, or in sandy Pylos, or perhaps with Menelaus in Sparta? My Orestes is certainly not dead yet." I said, "Why do you ask me that, Atriades? I know nothing, whether he is alive or dead, and it is a bad thing to babble like the blowing wind." As we two stood talking together of our sorrows in this mournful way, other ghosts came up. Achilles and Patroclus and Antilochus, the man without stain and without reproach, and Aias, who was most handsome and noble of all next to the admirable Achilles. The ghost of Achilles knew me, and said in plain words, "Here is Prince Odysseus, who never fails. O you foolhardy man, your ingenious brain will never do better than this. How did you dare to come down to Hades, where dwell the dead without sense or feeling, phantoms of mortals whose weary days are done?" I answered him, "My lord Achilles Pelides, our chief and our champion before Troy, I came to ask Tiresias if he had any advice or help for me on my way to my rugged island home. For I have not yet set foot in my own country, since trouble has ever been my lot. But you, Achilles, are most blessed of all men, who ever were or will be. When you lived, we honored you like the gods, and now you are a potentate in this world of the dead. Then do not deplore your death, Achilles." He answered at once, "Don't depraise death to me, Odysseus. I would rather be plowman to a yeoman farmer on a small holding than lord paramount in the kingdom of the dead. But do tell me something about the fine son of mine. Did he go to the war and take a leading place or not? And tell me of my noble old father. Have you heard anything of Peleus? Does he still hold his honorable place among the Myrmidons? Or have they lost respect for him throughout the land because his hands and feet are stiff with age? For I am no longer under the sun to help him, strong as I once was on the battlefield of Troy when I struck down the best of them and defended our people. Let me be for a short time in my father's house, strong as I once was, and I would make not a few fear my anger in my invincible hands, if they are keeping him by force from his honest duty." I answered, "I have nothing to tell you of your noble father Peleus, but I can tell you about your beloved son Neoptolemus, and there is nothing to hide. In fact, I brought him in my own ship from Scyros to join the Achaean army. When we held a council of war, he was always the first to speak, and always found the right thing to say. Old Nestor and I were superior. When we met our enemies in battle, we did not lag among the crowd or in the scrimmage, but showed himself well in front, the bravest of the brave. Many a man he killed in fair fight. I will not name all those he killed on the field, but what a man was brought low when he ran his sword through Eurypylos to Lycidas, that young hero, and many others of his people fell by his side that a woman might enjoy her gewgaws. That was the handsomest man I ever saw, except Memnon the Magnificent. And when the best men of our army were about to enter the wooden horse which Epeios made, I was put in charge to open and close the door as I thought fit. The more captains were wiping tears from their eyes and trembling in every limb, but I saw no pallor on his cheeks and no tear in his eyes. Again and again he begged me to let him out, and handled his sword-hilt and heavy spear, eager to have at his enemies. When at last we had sacked the city, he took his share of the spoil in a special price, and embarked unwounded, with never a scratch from sword or spear, although there are plenty of those in war. You take your luck when war runs amok. When I told him this, the ghost of clean-heeled Achilles marched away with long steps over the meadow of asphodel, proud to hear how his son had made his mark. The other ghosts of the dead halted in turn, and each asked what was near to his heart. But alone of them all, the soul of Aias Telemenades kept part, still resentful for my victory over him when there was question about the arms of Achilles. The goddess his mother set them up as a prize for the best man. How I wish I had never won such a prize. What a life was lost for that. Aias, first of all, the Danaans, in noble looks and noble deeds, except Achilles, the incomparable. And so I addressed him in gentle words. Aias, great son of a great father, were you never to forget your anger against me for those accursed arms, not even in death? That prize was a disaster, seeing that we lost a tower of strength like you. Our whole nation mourns your loss continually, no less than we mourn Achilles Peliades. Zeus alone is to blame and no one else, because he hated the Danaan host so vehemently, and brought fate upon you. Nay, come this way, my lord, and listen to my pleading. Master your passion and your proud temper. He replied not a word, but moved away into Erebos, after the other ghosts of the dead. Then, in spite of all, he should have spoken to me or I to him, but I wished to see the souls of the others who were dead. There I saw Minos, the glorious son of Zeus, holding a golden rod and giving sentence upon the dead. He was seated, and the dead were around him in the house of Hades, with its wide portal, some seated and some standing, as each asked the judge for his decision. After him I noticed the huge figure of Orion driving the beasts in a mass over the meadow of asphodel, the game which he had killed himself when he was alive on the lonely hills. His hands held a cudgel of solid bronze, unbroken forever. And I saw Tychios, the son of Gaia, most majestic, lying upon the ground. 9 roods he covered, and 2 vultures sat, one on each side, and tore his liver, plunging under the skin. He could not defend himself with his hands. This was his punishment because he had laid violent hands on Leto, the famous consort of Zeus, when she was passing through the beautiful grounds of Panopeus on her way to Pytho. Tantalus also I saw in his misery, standing in a lake up to his chin, always thirsty, but try as he would, not a drop could he lap up. For as often as the poor man dipped his head to take a drink, the water was sucked back and disappeared until the dark earth showed under his feet as fate dried it up. Tall trees in full leaf dangled their fruit over his head, pears and pomegranates and fine juicy apples, sweet figs and ripe olives, but as often as the poor old man reached out a hand to catch one, the wind tossed them all up to the clouds. Sisyphus also I saw in his tedious task as he held up a monstrous stone with both hands. Scrabbling with his feet and pushing with his hands, he heaved the stone up the hill. But just as he was about to topple it over the crest, the weight was too much for him and turned it back. Down along to the ground rolled the stone, pitiless. Then he would push again, stretching and struggling, with sweat pouring off every limb and the dust rising from his head. After him I saw mighty Heracles, his phantom that is, but Heracles himself is with the immortal gods, as happy as the day is long, with graceful youth for his bride. Around the phantom the ghosts were gibbering and twittering like a flock of birds, and scattering hither and thither. He stood holding his naked bow with arrow on string, looking as black as night and casting dreadful glances round forever, as if just about to shoot. A terrible baldric was round his chest, a golden strap covered with wonderful work, bears and wild boars and glaring lions, battles and conflicts and bloody death. May the artist never invent another work of art who made that terrible baldric by his genius. The hero knew me when he caught sight of me, and sped his sword straight to the mark. Prince Laertiades, Odysseus, never failing, I pity you, for you are dogged by an evil fate, as I was, under the light of the sun. My father was Zeus Cronian, yet I had infinite tribulation to endure, for I was bound to a contemptible fellow who set me dangerous labors. Once he sent me here for the dog, because he thought he could find no more dangerous labor than that. I brought him up. I got him from Hades, sure enough, under conduct of Hermes and Pallas Athena. With these words he strode back into the house of Hades, but I remained where I was, in case any other of the heroes of past times should appear. And, indeed, I should have seen others of those ancient men whom I wished especially to see, as Theseus and Perseus, those famous sons of gods, but before I could see them, the innumerable hosts of the dead gathered together with deafening cries, and I grew pale with fear that awful Persephone might send me out of Hades, upon me a gorgon head of some dreadful monster. Then I went back at once to the ship and told my men to loose the hawser and get away. They were soon rowing steadily on their benches, and the current bore us steadily down the ocean stream, oars at first, afterwards a following breeze.